Okay, people, we're back again. We have got what looks like a horrendous question here, also on genetics, but we're going to work through it. So whenever you see any kind of question on genetics, just think, let's take it at the beginning and work our way through. All right, so we have a Chinese farmer has been involved in a project in which they breed cattle artificially. All right, now remember, we get artificial selection and natural selection. With artificial selection, we as human beings choose what we want these animals to have. So if we want them to have long ears, if we want animals that are going to produce lots of babies or lay lots of eggs or build lots of bulk quickly, whatever the case is, we take the traits we want and we breed them into the animal. Viciousness in dogs, for example, for guard dogs. You've got the Bulls were bred as fighting dogs, where you've got your Chihuahua was bred to just make a big damn noise, like my neighbor's dog, for example. So you've got all these little things that we choose, and here they've taken cattle and they have bred cattle specific for the traits they want. Now, what do we want cattle for? We want them for meat and we want them for milk. So we're going to look at taking, if we can get a cow, breed cattle that produce lots of milk, and when they now get past the age of producing milk, and we can then slaughter them and have lots of meat, well, hello, we're in the pound seats. So here we go. Chinese farmers have been involved in a project in which they breed cattle artificially. So now we're looking at artificial selection and not natural selection like Darwin had. All right, local Quinchuan, I hope I've said that right, Quinchuan cattle are bred with Holstein cattle, which is the H, to produce a crossbreed QH. The result of the projects are shown in the table below. So here we look at our table. There are cross numbers, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. We cross a cow and the bull. So we have a cow that is the Quinchuan versus the Holstein. Then we have Quinchuan 1 times Holstein, and Quinchuan 2 times Holstein, and Quinchuan 3 times Holstein. So clearly these are the number of crosses that have taken place. They're the offspring, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have the milk yield in kilograms. Look at how this milk just goes on. So by the time we get to the Quinchuan Holstein 4 group, we've got a milk yield of 5,110 kilograms of milk. People, that is like 2.5 times more than we started out with. The fat content in that milk is going to be less and less. It starts at 7.3, it goes to 3.3, and eventually we're getting it to 2.3. Now that is the perfect milk. We're getting a cow that can produce lots of milk with less fat, and that's healthier milk. So and this by the way is what we do when we start selectively breeding and we artificially select what we want. Okay, state what happened to each of the following after four generations of crosses. So we're going to talk about the milk yield. Well, the milk yield went from 2,076 kilograms and it increased to 5,110 kilograms. All right, so it more than doubled the milk yield. Okay, and the fat content was reduced from, I think it was 3.7, 3.7% to 2.3%. So it was reduced by approximately a third. Okay? Tabulate two differences between natural selection and artificial selection. I'm not going to write it down. I need for you to think about this. Natural selection is when good traits are passed on to the next generation naturally. And the good trait then assists that organism to survive and increases their chances of survival so that they in turn are able to pass those good genes on to the next generation. And that is how natural selection takes place. It's for survival of the fittest. And when the fittest survive, they pass those traits on to the next generation. When we look at artificial selection, man, us, we decide. So we literally play God. We decide we want that trait, and that is the trait that we cross and breed into the organism until we get, and we carry on doing that until we get the characteristic to come through as we want it to be. All right, so we specifically genetically modify organisms, and that is where your genetic or your artificial selection, genetically modified crops and animals come from. It's from us. Okay, so that's the differences. And remember, when they say the word tabulate, it means you have to draw a table and write what you want here and write what you want there. So you would have put natural selection here, artificial selection here, and you then compare the two traits. Okay. In the South African cattle industry, a fat content of between 2 and 3.5 is considered ideal. 3 and 3.5 is considered ideal. If you were a South African cattle farmer, which cross would you choose to farm to maximize your profits? Now look, we like 3 to 3.5. So cross 1, the Q1s sit with 3.7, that is too high for us, okay? And 2.3 is too low for us. So we would go with either QH, we would go with QH2 or QH3. Why would we prefer QH3? Because QH2 is only going to give us 3,718 kilograms, whereas QH3 is going to give us 4,307. So which cattle would we choose? We would choose QH3, which would yield 4,307 kilograms of milk with a fat content of 3.3. With fat of 3.3 or 3,3%. And that should be perfect for us. Right? And this question just carries on and on and on. We just can't get rid of it. Give an explanation of your answer to 5.3, whatever we just said, because QH3 would give us that amount of milk, and it would give us that amount of fat. I answered this question in the other question because I hadn't seen it. And that is the end of that question. People, any kind of cross that you get, use your common sense. Artificial selection, natural selection, you need to know the difference between the two. And you don't have to be Einstein. You don't have to have studied life sciences in grade 12 to know artificial selection. We select those characteristics artificially. We as human beings breed and crossbreed until we get the correct thing that we want. For example, shade grass, right? Naturally, the grass will die in the shade. So what do? We produce and breed grass that likes shade and grows in shade so that we can have shade grass. Or frost-resistant crops, or crops that make mealies that have more mealie plants that have more mealies on a cob, grow faster, or pest-resistant. So to a degree, genetically modifying our crops is a good thing. Increasing shelf life, for example, it's a good thing. But where do we draw the line? And the problem is that people will argue that we are interfering with God. We're interfering with nature. We are changing what nature would have. Also, we have no way now of seeing the repercussions of what we are doing. So we would have to have a couple of years' time to see if there are any real detrimental effects of growing plants or chickens that, for example, lay more eggs. is there enough protein in those eggs for us to consume as human beings? Because that would be the whole reason why we did it. Or extending the shelf life of a tomato. How is that detrimental to our health? And we don't know, because not enough tests have been done to check it out. I mean, when can you ever do enough? Don't interfere with nature. And that is what you are doing when you genetically modify things, like we did. But now, if we looked at the cows here, it shows, wow, if you're a farmer and you can have that one cow, and that one cow yields 2,000 liters of milk versus 5,000 liters of milk, which cow are you going to choose? Clearly you're going to choose the one, especially if you're a milk farmer, who yields the 5,000 liters of milk. Why? To make more money quicker and faster. We're going to go to the studio for an ad break, and yeah, when we finished with the ad break, we're going to try and finish off nicely here and prepare you as best as we can for this exam that you are writing very, very soon. See you in a minute.